Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to invite you to Elombah Television tonight. Tonight, again, we have a very interesting topic: the Middle East Israeli-Gaza conflict, implications for Nigeria's security. Our guest tonight is Mr. Nwankwo Nwaezeigwe, PhD. Dr. Nwaezeigwe is a director, Nigeria Civil War and Genocide Research Network. He's a research fellow, Institute of African Studies, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Dr. Nwaezeigwe is also an expert in ethno-religious conflict with particular focus on Black Africa and the Middle East. Dr. Nwaezeigwe, you are welcome to our program tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Elombah of the Elombah Television film.
Mr. Nwaezeigwe, let's establish your expertise to discuss this topic. Can you give us a brief background of your research work on the topic we have tonight?
Yes, I did my PhD on Black Africa, Middle East relation, with particular reference to the Middle East conflicts. And that was actually, and we tried to look at the background history of the Middle East conflicts, dragging it up to African involvement, the Middle East diplomacy, the conflict of diplomacy between Israel and the Middle East Arab countries, at a point trying to corner Africa.
So what is the background? Can you give us the background to the Middle East conflict, please?
Well, I can say really that the story of Middle East conflict is quoted in a commingle of devious falsehoods constructed on the layers of impeccable truths. And what do I mean by that? It's a story that has been riddled with propaganda, mostly against the state of Israel. We all know, because there are issues that come over there, the issue of occupied territories, whose territories are being occupied, and who are the people being, occupying the territory. That is first. Secondly, I want to state emphatically that the idea of Palestinian states was the creation of the British colonial administrators of the Middle East, which the Arabs never accepted until after the 1966 Six-Day War, 1967 Six-Day War. That was when the idea of Palestinian conflict came up. Thirdly, the present Arab states, Arab countries, from Saudi Arabia to Iraq, were the creation of British, European colonial powers. It never existed. They never existed. The idea of Arabism, Arab nationalism, was even the creation of Antonius and a Christian Arab who coined the idea Arabism. So let me start that before 1940, before the First World War, the entire Middle East was a province of Ottoman Empire. There was nothing, there was no Saudi Arabia, there was no Syria, there was no Jordan. In fact, the whole thing started when the Sheriff of Hijaz was the western part of the present Saudi Arabia, under the control of Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Sublime Porte, that is the emperor of the Sultan Empire. So used to appoint a sheriff in charge of Mecca and Medina, the Muslim areas, who will now take charge of refuge of the pilgrimages. While the Najd is Sultanate of Najd is being run by the Sultan Abdul Aziz Ibn Saud. In 2016, British met Ibn Ali Hussein, the sheriff appointed the Ottoman Empire, to join them to fight the Ottoman Empire in the First World War, that if he succeeds, they will give him the entire Middle East Arab nation as his own nation. That was why he now joined. And he was granted independence as the Kingdom of Hijaz in 1916. The British defeated Ottoman Turks, but the League of Nations decided to share the territories between France and Britain, with France taking charge of the present Syria and Lebanon, Britain taking charge of Iraq, and the Hijaz Kingdom, and the Palestine and Transjordan. Then in 1924, Ibn Saud of the Najd Sultanate invaded Hijaz and conquered Hijaz and united it in 1925 as the present Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia never existed before 1925. In compensation of the loss of Hijaz, the British government now appointed these three sons of King Ali ibn Hussein of Hijaz, appointed as the kings of Jordan, the kings of Syria, and the kings of the king of Iraq. The Syrian king, Iraqi king were later overthrown by military coups, while the Jordanian king now remained. So that's the situation there. The Jews, if you look historically, for those who are familiar with the Bible, you find that the Jews were dispersed from the Holy Land as far back as 70 year before Christ. That was when the Romans invaded and destroyed the Second Temple and drove the Jews.
You mean, did you mean 70 CE or 70 BCE?
70 CE, 17 years after Christ. The Romans, because the Jews revolted in 66 AD, drove out the Roman governors, and the Romans decided to stage a comeback and defeated the Jews after laying siege. That was when they bought the Second Temple, and it was this Second Temple that was burnt that the Muslims, when they emerged from their jihad, from Muhammad jihad in 622 AD, it is on this particular Second Temple that the present Al-Aqsa Mosque is built. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Muslims are claiming today, is constructed on the foundation of the Second Temple. And this is where the Jews are claiming part of the temple, and the Arabs are saying it is their second holiest temple. So
okay, let's establish these historical facts one after the other.
Yeah.
Before 1914,
yes,
who were the inhabitants of today's Palestine?
Yes, the inhabitants of today's Palestine were mainly Arabs with some few Israelis who were there and who have started coming back with the help of Ottoman Turks, because the Ottoman Turk granted both the Jews and all religions, what we could say, instituted freedom to worship and giving them separate part of administration and rules. They were occupied by some elements of Jews and Arabs, because at that time, remember, the Turkish Empire conquered Arab jihadists, Arab invaders, who actually Islamized the Middle East. So the Turks, Ottoman Turks, occupied, just conquered them. So they became the administrators. So
okay, sorry, because I wanted to start this discussion from 1914, but I discovered that in trying to answer the questions of 1914, you are going back again to Ottoman Empire. So I think let us start first of all from the events of 66 CE. You have stated that in 66 CE, that is 66 years after the death of Jesus Christ, the Romans revolted against, the Jews revolted against the Roman Empire.
No, the Jews. Yeah.
The Jews revolted against the Roman Empire in 66 CE. Then in 70 CE, the Romans returned and destroyed Jerusalem. They burnt down the temple.
Yes. Yes.
They burnt down the temple, and the Jews were scattered over, basically all over the world.
Yes.
Okay, so after the event of 70 CE,
yes,
who were the next inhabitants of the Palestine land, say up till 1,000 years after Jesus Christ? Let's establish that.
Yeah, after that time, you see, there was a massive Arab invasion.
Around what year? Around what year?
In 622 AD, when Muhammad.
Yes, no, I want to establish. If you don't know, we pass it. But my question is, before Muhammad, because you are jumping 600 days afterwards.
Okay.
After 70 CE, who were the next inhabitants of Palestine land after 70 CE?
Yes, the Jews were there. Remember, it was some of them that were deported. The Arameans were there. The Carthaginians were there. The Lebanese, the Syrians were there. And
so let's say that after 70 CE, a lot of people who were then under the Roman Empire inhabited Jerusalem.
Yes, with
up till yes.
Most of them Christianized, because by that time Christianity has begun to develop, and especially after the conversion of Emperor Constantine in
around 350 years. Around 350 years after Christ. Yes.
Yes, he was converted, and so gradually, the Middle East became Christianized up to Saudi Arabia, and at that time it was now a dichotomy between Jews and Christians.
So, who were the next major inhabitants of the Palestine land around the demise of the Roman Empire? Let's get to that level.
Okay, when the Roman Empire, remember, the Roman Empire was conquered by the Islamists. After the conquest of the Roman Empire in Christianity, Roman Empire became Christianized. And when Islam came, Islam became the comforting force. Are you getting me? At that time, the whole Egypt, the whole North Africa, were Christianized. Islam came, and
we accept that. No, we accept that. We are not discussing religion. My point is, around that Palestine land, that Middle East.
Yes.
Around the year 600 CE, before Muhammad started his conquest, who were the inhabitants of Palestine?
Okay. The Jews, remember, not all the Jews were taken away.
You have said that before, but the Jews were scattered. Who were the major? Who were the dominant force?
No, the dominant force at that time were described as Roman citizens. Roman citizens were defined, it's just like when you talk of a citizen of American citizens, they are multi-ethnic. You had the Greeks who were there before the Romans. They became Roman citizens. You have the Jews who became Roman citizens. You have the Armenians who became Roman citizens. You have the Assyrians who became Roman citizens. You have the Chaldeans who are actually the owners of present Iraq, who also became Roman citizens. So
brilliant. So around what year did the Ottoman Empire conquer Jerusalem?
Yes, well, it's a process.
Around what year? Around what year?
It's in the Middle Ages. Remember?
Around what the Middle Ages? Give us what year? Around what year the Middle Ages?
It's you can say around the let me say the Seljuk 17th century. It should be around the 12th century.
So Saladin, good. Okay, go ahead.
Saladin, who actually came as the Seljuk Turks, because the Ottoman Turks took over from the Seljuk Turks. Saladin now conquered Jerusalem in 12th century. And remember, before Saladin conquered Jerusalem, the Crusaders had driven the Muslims from Jerusalem. So Saladin came yes, the Crusaders because Europe now organized crusades to reconquer Jerusalem, which they did. And later, Saladin of the Seljuk came up and drove the Crusaders, that European Crusaders, European Christians, who then were ruling Jerusalem, drove them out in 12th century AD. And it was when he drove them out that another wave of Muslims now came up.
So around what year did they, so that we make progress, around what year did Muslims conquer Jerusalem?
The Muslims conquered Jerusalem immediately, few years after the conquest of Hijaz, that's the part of Western Saudi Arabia, Mecca. Because from that point, remember, Muhammad was a trader, a driver with his wife, moving between Mecca and Jerusalem as a trader. So immediately after the conquest of Mecca, the next point, few years after 622 AD, was Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was
we want to establish one point that
yes,
after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE,
yes,
the Palestine land came under Roman control.
yes,
and that doesn't mean that
to Palestine.
Yes, and so then I eventually the Ottoman Empire also conquered Jerusalem. Then eventually Muslims also conquered Jerusalem and inhabited the land. And that was when they built the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the place where the second temple was situated.
Yes.
Now let's now jump to 1914 as we move into the 20th century. Around 1900, who were the major inhabitants of Jerusalem, the Palestine lands?
Yes, the major inhabitants of Jerusalem. You have more Arab population.
Thank you.
Arab population. You have Jewish population there. And when you are talking of Arabs, then Arab is a loose term because it's also included Christians. That is descendants of original Christians. They were also known as Arabs today. Like if you go to Egypt, you find that about 30% of Egyptian population are Christian, Coptic Christians. They're all named Arabs. You go to Lebanon, the Lebanon has a majority of Christian population. They're all called Arabs. Even in Syria, the Assyrian church members are called Arab. They're all Christians. In Iraq, members
okay,
of
so when the British Empire, the British Empire were controlling Palestine, who were the inhabitants of that? Is what year did the British Empire leave Palestine and give them independence?
British, it's not a question of giving them independence. Britain did not give them independence. The point is that in 1947,
before 1947, say around 1914, who did the League of Nations give authority to live Palestine? The League of Nations.
So not to live, to manage Turkish man. He gave Britain and France.
Thank you.
France was giving Syria, and France used its own idea to create the Christian, predominantly Christian part of Syria to become what is today Lebanon.
All right, let's now move to the creation of Israel. And the nation of Israel was created in 1948.
Yes, it was created in 1948. Under the point is that in 1947, already there were crises. The Jews already trying to secure their land, which was declared to them by the Balfour Declaration of 2nd November 1917, after the conquest of Jerusalem by the Allied forces. There was then the Balfour Declaration that promised the Jews that they will return, they will be granted their safe home in Palestine. Then from that moment, the Arabs started also developing. The idea of Palestinian states was actually the creation of the United Nations trusteeship. In 1947, they brought up the first partition plan in which they divided Palestine between Israel and the Arab Palestinians. The Arabs refused. Israel accepted. Israel accepted the partition. The Arabs refused. In the midst of the crisis, Britain,
why did they refuse? Why did Arabs refuse the partition?
First, the Arabs refused because the initial agreement between Britain and the Sheriff of Hijaz, that King Hussein, Ibn Hussein, was that if he supported them in this First World War against Turkey, he will be granted the whole of Palestine to become one kingdom under him. Unfortunately, that plan could not work. First, Hijaz was conquered by Ibn Saud in 1925 to become the present Saudi Arabia. And secondly, the partition plan demanded authority did not devolve on Britain alone. It was shared between Britain and France. So the idea of that original plan did not work. But the Arabs still believe that Palestine, that the idea of creating Israel cannot work. That all they know is that whole place should be Arab territory. And that was why they refused. And in the midst of that confusion, Britain, unable to, and also so,
Network has dealt with you.
Independent on the eve of British withdrawal. And the same day, the Arab nations invaded Palestine, Israel, to fight Israel. In that war,
in what year? In what year?
1948. And that year, Israel, apart from being victorious, they had the land partitioned and annexed it. Jordan took over East Jerusalem and present West Bank and annexed it. Syria took over Golan Heights and annexed it. They did not talk about even, you see, when Egypt annexed Gaza, Egypt did not talk about Palestinian state because they never believed in it. When Jordan annexed West Bank and East Jerusalem, Jordan did not talk of, think about Palestinian state. When Syria annexed Golan Heights, Syria did not talk about Palestinian state. So the idea of Palestinian state did not occur to them.
All right. So, but at the end of the day, so around what year now did that peace agreement reached between Israel, Jordan, Egypt to create Palestinian state? And what year did that emerge?
No, it went gradually because someone like Arafat, who was a descendant of Hussein and a cousin of the present king of Jordan royal family, as a student, began to develop Palestinian Student Association when he was a student in Egypt. And from that place, he started emerging. And in 1960s, he formed the Palestinian Organization, Palestinian Party. He was actually the people who now started advancing the idea of Palestinian states. And the idea continued until the 1967 Six-Day War, when Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and some Arabs, Iraq and Saudi Arabia, decided to deal with Israel finally, the Six-Day War. And it was during the Six-Day War that Israel now reconquered Golan Heights from Syria, reconquered East Jerusalem and West Bank, and reconquered Gaza Strip from them. And it was from that moment that the idea of creating, when the Arabs now knew that the possibility of obstructing Israel could not work, they now decided to support. The Palestinian state through Yasser Arafat, by helping them to go on this idea of civil disobedience and outright war against Israel.
So today we now have a Palestinian state following a peace treaty.
We don't have a Palestinian state.
So what do we have? What do we have?
Palestinian state. We have a Palestinian authority under the sovereignty of the state of Israel. Gaza is under the sovereignty of state of Israel. They are quasi-authorities under the state of Israel. Because security-wise, as far as the Palestinian Authority has no army, they only have a police.
What is the idea of these two states? Who originated the idea of a two-state solution?
It is United Nations partition of 1947. Just the United Nations to solve the problem.
Okay. What is the nature of the peace agreement negotiated by Bill Clinton between Yasser Arafat and I think Shimon Peres?
We are talking of the Camp David Accord. Camp David Accord of 1978. You find out it started with Camp David Accord between Israel and Egypt. Then moved on to Madrid Conference that included all of them. And then from Madrid Conference, I come to Declaration of Principle 1993 between Israel and the Palestinians that gave room to the present Palestinian Authority. So it's a very long process.
Okay, what is the last internationally recognized United Nations resolution for the peace between the Israel and the Palestinians? What is the last internationally recognized resolution of the United Nations on that question?
The recognized one is just the Madrid Conference and the DOP, Declaration of Principle, that gave room, that gave rise to this Palestinian Authority, and then and provided the space for further negotiations to look at the possibility of two-state solutions. But the impossibility of two-state solutions is very, very obvious. Standoff between the Jews and the Arabs. The Arabs don't believe that Israel should exist as a state, and Israel also believe that, as far as they're concerned, Palestine is their historic homeland. And in fact, most Christians believe that Israel have the right to own the land historically. Because as far as we're concerned, most of those things being planned, a lot of them are under West Bank and East Jerusalem. And these are areas even Christians will not want Arab to take control because of the obvious Arab hostility to Christianity and other religions. That's the position. And that can also lead to the present crisis that originated from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood conflict. That's the cause of the present problem we have that.
All right, so we now have today, Israel is now back on the news. What started this latest conflagration between the Palestinians and the Israelis? Do you have an idea?
Yeah,
because it will lead us to its implications for Nigerian security. So what started this latest conflagration today?
The simple thing is that the East Jerusalem, when in 1948, before then, the Israelis have been returning in bits from their exiles as a result of pogroms in Russia, Eastern Europe, and other areas. So they started coming back. And when they started, in the 19th century, they started coming back gradually under the Ottoman Turks. And when they came back, and when they returned, what they normally did was to buy land from Arabs. They didn't come to claim, oh, we own this land. No, Jews were buying lands from Arabs. So the issue is that Sheikh Jarrah, there is some about 100 Israeli, properties in the present Sheikh Jarrah, which is a suburb of East Jerusalem. The property were bought in 1876 from Arabs by Jews. And they were settled there and mixed with other people. But during the 1948 war, the independence war, a lot of those Israelis were driven out from East Jerusalem because of the conflict. So when they left, when they were driven out, they left their properties. And when they left their properties, Jordan, which now conquered the area, took that properties as enemy properties. When Israel now came back and reconquered those areas, East Jerusalem, in 1967, gradually Arabs, those properties have been distributed to Arabs. Israel did not want to force them. They gradually had to tell them, gradually had to make laws to tell them that Israelis have rights to claim the property, just the Nigerian abandoned property, Igbo abandoned property we have in River State. When they were abandoned, the Jews said, no, we have rights. Jews have right to claim the properties they abandoned in Sheikh Jarrah, now that they are on the cemetery. They went to court. Court now ruled that Israel have right to occupy it. In fact, earlier, the Arabs...
What is... okay, let's move to Nigeria now because our time is running. What is Nigeria's position? What is Nigeria's official position with regards to this dispute between Israel and the Palestinians?
The present Nigerian government is being cautious. First, because of the state of the turn between the Israeli government and to some Arab nations, like Saudi Arabia, which is in a subdued, diplomatic relationship. I also know about Trump's Abraham Accord that led to establishment of diplomatic relations between Israel, Bahrain, and of course the UAE and other areas. So, and this year, nations that are against the world, even Egypt is against that is the NASA. I mean the people fighting the Hamas, they're against them because these are the people exploiting terrorism to other wars. They serve as models to terrorists in the other areas. So Egypt don't even like them. And that is why most Arab nations are keeping quiet on the crisis because they want Hamas to be dealt with. So Nigeria is very, very, as long as Saudi Arabia is trading cautious, as long as Egypt is trading cautiously and other moderate Arab nations are trading cautiously, Nigeria is very, very calm and watchful. And that explains why Turkey, which is on the other side, have tried to cower Nigeria into joining the fray of anti-Israel. But Nigeria, because presently Nigeria is in a state of precipice, we can't be talking about the killing of 70 Palestinians, 70 Hamas in Gaza Street, whereas daily we lose over 200. We have lost over 5,000 Nigerians from internal conflicts, from herdsmen, from Boko Haram, and from unknown gunmen. And no nation, United Nations, never moved a motion to curtail it. AU never moved a motion to curtail it. No, even ECOWAS never bothered to here. And just few people. I think,
I think in the Middle East now, more than 200 people have died. Our listeners will want to know,
yes,
how many nations have condemned Israeli bombing in Gaza since last week? Have any nation condemned it, including Nigeria?
Well, I've not heard the Nigerian nation condemning it. condemning the carnage, but you can see the major people condemning it being Turkey, Pakistan, some Arab radical nations, like even Iraq was very cautious. Then Syria condemned it,
What about the United
Syria
States? Have the United States condemned? Have the United States condemned Israel?
United States cannot even condemn. United States supports it and have been blocking any resolution of condemnation at the Security Council, because Hamas are the aggressors. Israel is just on the defense, and they continue hammering. Look, Israel has right to defend itself. And remember very, very carefully that never supported the state of Israel. They never supported the peace accord. And if you look at their 1987 declaration, they say that their mission is jihad, to obliterate Israel. Even when in 2007 they decided to review, they said that they would accept Palestinian state, but only on the temporary basis until Israel is off.
But what do you have to say about there have been global demonstrations by citizens against Israeli bombing of Gaza, including in the UK, France, the United States. People have been demonstrating against the Israeli bombing of Gaza.
Yes, I say that as hypocritical, because first it shows that we are not valid. We blacks are not valid. How many people have demonstrated against? You are talking of 200 being killed. The other time, in 2007, Benue State alone buried more than 200.
But that is different. It is not another country bombing. No, that is different, because it is not another country bombing Nigeria or killing Nigerians. It's with Nigeria's domestic criminal terrorist issues. It doesn't involve another country. So why should the United Nations intervene?
Yeah. What was? Yes. First of all, it's because of the power of propaganda. Those who are anti-Jews, in essence, there must be equity in every action you take. Those who seek justice must come with equity. Those who seek equity must come with clean hands.
What about Nigerians? Have there been demonstrations? Have there been demonstrations in Nigeria against Israeli bombing of Gaza?
Unlike before, if it were before, there should have been demonstrations against the Igbo people burning.
Not Igbo. I'm not talking about Igbo. Have there been demonstrations against? No, I'm not talking about Igbo. I'm talking about, have there been demonstrations against Israeli bombing of Palestine? Peaceful demonstrations in Nigeria.
I think all I mean is that the Shias, the Islamic of the Shias, did some few comments, flat, not massive demonstration as before, because the nation is tense. Maybe those people who should have led the demonstrations are now the bandits, are now part of the Boko Haram. And some of them are even hiding, scared of their own security. So no massive demonstration as used to be.
But is there any tension? Is there any tension? Because
demonstration,
we used to know that before, if something like this happened in Europe, there are often demonstrations in Nigeria against such happening. So today, is there the risk? Is there the risk of security breakdown in Nigeria because of today's Middle East tension?
I don't think there will be such risk. No risk of law breaking down, because the law in Nigeria are already broken down. So which other law with demonstration? The demonstration can only even give room for further action by the other people to seize the opportunity. So there's a state of conflict. There's a state of disorder in Nigeria. So which other demonstration, which other breakdown in law, when you cannot travel safely from Lagos to Abuja on road, from Benin to Lagos, or by road? So which other state of disorder with demonstration bring? So
should Nigerians should Nigerians be worried? Should Nigerians be worried at the continuing war between Israel and Hamas in Palestine? Should Nigerians be worried if it continues?
We should not be worried. We should not be worried because first, it does not concern them. Second, I repeat from Israeli scientific development, states like Niger State, all those Kano states, I repeat from Israeli agricultural expertise today. So they'll be very careful in talking out. But most Southerners don't know about it. Most Israeli projects are carried out in the north today. So they cannot talk, particularly when Saudi Arabia, Ibn Salman, who just phoned Netanyahu today for them to discuss, ceasefire ongoing. But most of the Arab nations, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they want Hamas to be dealt with because remember, Hamas started as a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Egyptian-based Muslim Brotherhood, that brought Morsi to power, that made Sisi. So Hamas is a problem. It's only being sponsored by Qatar. Qatar is they can now talk of the hate concern who are just trying to fire few missiles. Not our business. We should face our internal business because nobody has been worried about our internal problems. There hasn't been any comment from the West or the East. So why should we bother about what is happening in the Middle East? It's not our business.
Let's be clear on this point.
Again, we be first.
Let's be clear on this point, Dr. Nwaezeigwe. The Hamas that controls Gaza, what countries or Islamic groups are affiliated to Hamas today?
You talk no affiliation, you talk of support.
Yes, so that's what I mean, support.
Hamas,
yes,
remember,
I mean support.
Yes, because yes, support. You have Iran supplying them with arms. You have Turkey supplying them with arms. Then you have Syria, Turkey, Iran. These are the major countries. And
okay, is Hamas still affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood? Are they still cooperating? The Muslim Brotherhood based in Egypt?
It's still there.
Okay, in Nigeria, do we have any? In Nigeria, do we have any Islamic groups that are affiliated to the Egyptian-based Muslim Brotherhood?
The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Well, I can read all of them. You see, when it comes to external aggression, that is interfaith conflict. The Muslims unite. You don't know who is a Shiite, you don't know who is a Sunni. Islamic Jihad also includes other people. The country, the religion that is actually the faction of Islam that actually affiliated or has strong sympathy for Hamas is the Shiites.
The Shiites
here in Nigeria, who are battling with the yes, they are the people whose leader is now has been in custody. They are the people who, because these are the people who see Iran as their own godfather. You can also see Turkey, you can also see Pakistan, and then Syria, where the Alawites, which Bashir belongs, is all it's a branch of Shiites, which is majority Shiite and being led today by a Shiite prime minister, is being very cautious because of the role being played by Saudi Arabia in the Gulf states.
So is it right to say that is it right to say that today's Middle East conflict, because it is limited to between Israel and Hamas and have not involved other Palestinians in the West Bank, will not have much impact on the Muslim world because
Yes, let me tell you, the Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas-led Palestinian, West Bank is also not comfortable with the Hamas, who are who want it to be removed because who did not like his peace, his state of peace with the state of Israel. There was supposed to be election, which Hamas has, was built to win, to be victorious because of the massive campaign of calumny against the Fatah party led by Mahmoud Abbas, until this crisis now erupted. So they want Hamas to be dealt with. Ismail Haniyeh and his group, Haniyeh, who is the prime minister and the leader in.
So finally, to conclude this discussion, is it now right to, because your network is not really being your network has not been very, very, very stable, is it right to say that because it is the Shiites in Nigeria that have sympathy for Hamas, and therefore the problem of Hamas will not impact so much on Nigeria, because even in Nigeria, the Shiites are the minority Muslim group? Is it right to reach that conclusion?
Well, no, it's not my conclusion. That is one factor. The second factor is that Nigeria is already in a state of confusion.
Okay.
So you can't be carrying an elephant on your head and now be trying to to pick goats and then be pursuing goats. It's impossible. The problem we have on our head today in Nigeria, both for Muslim bandits and other people, because demonstration could also lead to bandits striking. It could also bring infiltrate bandits. So those clerics, those Muslim clerics that should have supported the idea of such demonstrations are worried about their own safety. So they will not actually encourage it. That is the point. So Hamas, the Shia group is just secondary. But the point is that whenever it comes to the issue of Israel, there was no distinction on the various sects in Islam. They join in one to fight the Christians, they join in one to fight the Jews. But the problem in Nigeria is such that it is impossible for them to leave their intractable security question and now be focusing for the mini problem of another state. That's the situation. That is what is giving Nigeria a semblance of Sidon look.
All right. At this point, we'll be happy to welcome comments from our listeners or any other person in this Zoom meeting. If you have any question or any comment to make, you are welcome to this. So now we will be rounding up. What do you think, Dr. Nwaezeigwe, what do you think will be the final solution to the Middle East crisis? What position would you like Nigeria to take with regards to the Middle East crisis?
Nigeria should be neutral because Nigeria is a secular state. Most often, foreign interventions on the sentimentality. So you see Muslims supporting whatever crisis, and you see Christians supporting Israel. So the point is that Nigeria should be Nigeria should stand neutral and let us face our problems. But none of the nations, none of them cares about our own problems. Let us face our own problems. Technically, Israel has contributed more in the development of modern state of Nigeria than the Arabs. So we should not reach our technological and scientific gains from Israel with the risk of Islamic sentimentality. That is what we are saying. So we should stand neutral, allow them to slug it out and let us solve their problems. Let us solve our problems. We are talking about restructuring. We are talking about secession. We are talking of the evolution of powers. We are talking of domination by one group. We are talking of killings. We are talking of murderers invading us. We are talking of bandits from outside Nigeria invading us. We are talking of unknown gunmen reactive. So we have a lot of problems on our head. So let us face them first. Before looking at one.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nwaezeigwe, for having this discussion with us tonight. The topic we have been looking at is the Middle East, Israeli-Gaza conflict implications for Nigerian security.